What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mongols. This is our reaction show where we are going to break down the Hounds 1-0 win over, 1-1 draw against Indy. I am Mike. Joining me for this one is Steve and Justin. I think the performance was worthy of a win. And so for that, we are going to lead off with a let's go! I'll tell you what, guys, I was pretty calm and chill before coming in here, and then I went back and watched the highlights from this game, and now I'm all sorts of fired up again. But before we get into that, I know we just talked on Friday. Steve, how was your weekend?
So far, so good. Haven't done a ton. Was going to go hiking yesterday, and then there was supposed to be thunderstorms right like when I would have been probably on the way back. So I ended up just hiking a little bit in Emsworth at Vinegar Hollow. So a little closer to home, not having to worry about driving an hour somewhere, something like that. Friend had her 30th birthday today, so it was a big party down at their house, just like a mile down the street. So just hanging out there for a while this afternoon, and probably going to try to go hiking again tomorrow.
Nice. I keep forgetting that it's a long weekend. Justin, do you guys have anything going on? Or do anything?
No, we kind of cleared our calendars for tomorrow after vacation last week, and decided to make it a at-home chill, get the house back in order before work starts, again on Tuesday. And so, we had a good weekend as well. Just kind of chilled yesterday. Got up super early to, Brighton had the 7:30 a.m. So, was watching soccer on both ends of the day yesterday. So can't complain too much.
Nice. Very nice. Well, gentlemen, I want to get into sort of just overall thoughts from this game. Obviously, it was a 1-1 draw after Indy got really a goal on the last kick of the game. Before we get into any specifics, just getting a temperature check. How are you feeling after this one, Justin?
Yeah, I actually thought it was a great game. When you are fighting more than just the other team, it's hard, but I thought the guys played really well, in the circumstances that were given to them. And that's just soccer no matter what. We can get into the specifics of all this stuff, but you've got to play the game that's in front of you, right? And I thought the guy played well in the game that they were given. I'll leave it at that for now.
That's fair. Steve, temperature check?
I loved what I saw from the team. Everything from the response early in the game to just the great play throughout the game by the guys, to even some different subs, some that I really liked, some that I was like, okay, I still don't understand what you're doing, but I guess that's the decision you've got to make at this point. And just feel good about the Hounds, feel less good about the playoffs than I did going into last night, but not as bad as I could. But I think my big takeaway is a game like last night for me is bad for the league, and that frustrates me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we're going to get into why it's bad, I'm sure, in a few minutes. I'll just say temperature check wise, same. I think I left that game really upset, but also really proud of the guys, because to basically be playing with 10 men from the 4th minute on, to go up a goal and to be, beating a team in their home 1-0, a team that's a few spots ahead of you in the standings, and you're battling for a playoff spot, to make that happen is a fight and a resiliency that I wasn't certain was there, but I was really glad to see that it was there. And I'm hoping that they don't deflate, and I don't think they will deflate as a result of this result, but rather carry this feeling with them into the next few and say, hey, look what we just did with 10 men. Like, now let's go do that with 11 and, hopefully a ref that isn't too biased. One other thought, Zach Sternart over on X said the boys fought like warriors last night. To be down a man for 85 plus minutes and play like that was really amazing. I don't know if it came through on TV, but it was a really physical game and they never backed down. Luke could barely walk at the end. I think all of the guys were really just kind of putting everything on the line. There were, if you go back and actually watch through the highlights, there were a couple times where Biasi would take the ball down the wing and just didn't stop. Like he would get tackled, he would get thrown to the ground, and he would just bounce right back up and just keep going. And I don't know what the guys were drinking last night, but whatever it was, it definitely gave them a boost. I guess we should just get into sort of the one of the biggest talking points that we're all kind of dancing around is the ref in this case. So there were two big calls that, and again, the precursor here is that we're not looking necessarily for a scapegoat. The Hounds performed well enough to get the win. Yep. This was just a case where there were sort of two defining factors that they had to overcome. And unfortunately, both of them were the result of, we'll say, poor officiating. But the first one in particular, I think, could be left up to interpretation. So the first one was 4 minutes in. Pat Hogan goes in for a challenge. His leg is up. He catches Guenzotti across the leg. Guenzotti goes down. It's a yellow card. So at that point, 4 minutes in, you're thinking, okay, this is not great to have our starting center back be on a yellow card. A minute passes, and all of a sudden that yellow card is changed to a red. And so my thought is, in any other league, you have VAR. You have other refs chiming in that can say, hold on, you got that wrong. You need to go check that. Maybe it was a red. That is not the case in the USL. Typically, the call on the field stands unless some other evidence comes to light that makes you then want to change that call. So I was confused as to why it would go from a yellow to a straight red 4 minutes into the game.
Yeah.
Steve, what was going on in your head at that point?
So I'll be honest. I was finishing up a phone call with my best friend. So I have it muted. I'm watching it and I'm like, ooh, that foul looks like it hurt. And then I'm like, wait, that's a red card? And then like literally right after it's like all resolved is when I get off the phone. So then I'm like trying to like go back through and like see what happened. And then I'm watching it again today, both on the replay, but then like brought up the on-demand game and was watching through it. And it is inexplicable to me why the ref changed his mind. Do I think that a yellow card is fair? 100%. Do I think that Hogan could have played better defensively on that play? Sure. But I think both guys went in legs up a little bit recklessly, and Guenzotti just made a meal of his reaction afterwards. And I'll make no excuse that, sure, he got hit hard. But the ref was right there and saw it. And so then to listen to players complain and then change your mind, that to me is poor officiating. That to me is the ref saying, oh, maybe I don't know what I saw, right? And he's got to stick with his decision, because then you saw it the rest of the night. They were begging for calls all night long. And sometimes he was biting, sometimes he wasn't. But to me, that's just like, that's not good. And that's what I mean when I say that's not good for the league. And I will push a lot harder on this one than I will on the other decision.
Okay, well, before we go to the other decision, Justin, do you have any thoughts on the straight red?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell, right? When you're watching live and when you're not in person, it's hard to know how much of Guenzotti's leg Hogan got, and like, so I can understand where that one's a red based on what happened in the foul. My problem with it is exactly what you said. We don't have VAR. Could one of the sideline refs of the fourth official, who's fairly close to the play, have been in the center official's ear at that point saying like, yeah, you actually probably should change that call? Sure. It makes you look real bad when you go in definitively with a yellow card. There was no hesitation on the yellow. He went in right away, showed the yellow, no hesitation at all. I'm fine with that. But then to let a minute and a half go by with Guinzotti writhing around on the ground, like he's not going to be able to continue in the game, and then change your mind that's my problem with it. What Steve said of like, at that point, you lost control of the game. 4 minutes into the game, you now have lost control of the game. And that's frustrating to me.
Yeah. I think part of my beef with it too, first of all, the minute and a half is what is my biggest beef with it. Like something clearly happened between showing a yellow and changing your mind to a red. But even Guinzotti, he originally hits the ground and he rolls around for a little bit. But before it gets changed to a red, he jumps up and is like walking around like nothing's wrong, showing like the mark on his leg. Like he's clearly going to continue playing. This isn't like Hogan took him out for the rest of the game. Yeah. So it was just like, what is going on? Okay, so there was that call. And then now the second call, it sounds like it wasn't really even a call. It sounds like there may be more contention on. So essentially, Indy scores on literally the last kick of the game, which happens is it the 95th or the 96th minute of the game when initially we were told 4 minutes of stoppage time? It was something like that, where we were basically a minute past what the original stoppage time was, which is fine. But I think that my bigger beef is if you watched the ref the entire period of that stoppage time, no matter what the Hounds did, he's running at them and pointing at his watch like I'm stopping the watch. Like no matter what, every little thing, Eric Dick catches the ball and the ref's in his face saying, I'm stopping the watch. And it's like, what are you doing, dude? Like we're down 10 men. We're up 1-0. Of course, we're going to spend a little bit of time, but there was nothing that was egregious. And if there was egregious, card them. But he's running at Bob. He's running at Eric. He's running at every throw-in going, I'm watching the time. And it's like, and yet there's still a minute after that you let the play unfold to the point that they're able to get a shot in a opportune position that they ultimately put in with the last kick of the game. And so my argument at that point was just like, we should have never been in that situation in the first place, and you let this drag out. But I don't know if you guys agree with that. So, Justin, I'll start with you on this one, and then we'll go to Steve.
The thing that made me most frustrated about this one was the announcers knew what was happening. So something was said on the field because the announcers during the game said on the broadcast, we're going to get another minute because of the substitution that the Hounds just made. And the fact that that was so clearly communicated to the benches, to the fourth official, who you kind of see in the broadcast, he had talked to Bob, and they said on the broadcast he's talking to Bob right now. And then they kind of cut to the fourth official talking to the Indy coach and telling him what's going on. I'm fine with even adding some time because we made a substitution there. But the problem is we'd cleared it 2 times before the ball came back until we got the foul after the minute that you had just given us. And so what's frustrating me in that is you're telling us, okay, it's going to be another minute because you made a substitution, which is ridiculous because the sub should be 15 to 30 seconds at max. But we had already cleared the ball, gotten it out of a dangerous area twice in that half a minute before the foul was even called. And so to me, it's just another indication of you had lost. Nobody knew what calls you were making during that game. Nobody knew how you were going to call the game. Nobody knew what you were doing on the field because you weren't in control of the game as the referee. And as the referee, you've got to stay in control of the game. And it was just another indication to me of like, yeah, you don't actually know what you're doing right now. Like you're making stuff up on the fly, which is not the way you want to see a game being reffed.
Steve, do you agree with that?
I agree with everything you guys have said, and think it was poor by the officials. However, I think that the Hounds did themselves no favors because, they started to clear the ball a couple times, but they never got a really good clearance. They never did anything in that 90+4 and on where they really pushed the ball upfield and out of their own half, right? And so for me, that's where I'm like, I think an argument can be made that they didn't do enough to get the ball far enough upfield. And regardless of whether the ref was trying to meticulously count every second, which I think he was, and which is ridiculous, they needed to do a little bit more, and they needed somebody to dribble the ball. They needed to win a foul themselves, or they needed to just clear the ball well upfield, and that didn't happen. And so they put themselves in a position where what the ref is like, the ref is not like going to be on your side on this. Do something, and they didn't. And then there's that foul, which I don't even think was actually a bad foul. Like, I don't even know that should have been a whistle. But it's just like I felt like the ref put himself in that position, but the Hounds also didn't get themselves out of that position. So I would have liked to just see something different from the guys at that moment. And I get it, 90-something minutes, 10 men on the field. But also, like, on Bob, why are you bringing in a forward at that point in the game when you've got a midfielder on the bench if you're going to make that substitution? I just, like, I don't know. Like,
yeah. And
I'm going to give credit to what's his name that scored the goal?
So Williams?
Williams, yeah. Like, It was an excellent goal, right? Like, we'd be thrilled if the Hounds scored a goal like that at any point in the season. Like, there's nothing about that for me, I'm like, oh, we gave up a soft goal. Maybe a soft foul, but the finish was top tier for this league.
Yeah. One other thing on the ref, and then we'll move on from this. But Justin, you made the point that he kind of lost control. There was a moment in those last 5 minutes where we tried making a sub. We had a guy at the midline saying we were going to make a sub, and the ball went out of play, and Indy just took a quick throw, and the ref didn't stop the game to let the sub happen. And you could hear Bob screaming, like, what? Like, the sub's there, and the ref just like, like, it happened. And it's like, no, dude, you stop the game and you let the sub happen. That's the way you do this. And yeah, clearly it was a poor showing. And that's why I think it's so frustrating. And again, I don't like looking for excuses. We spend a lot of these shows talking about the refs. I don't like looking for excuses, but this felt like a game where, against all odds, the guys turned up, put in a performance against a playoff team, and did enough that they should have deserved all 3 points. And it's a shame that they had to overcome a ref, not just once, but like multiple times, and had to settle for a single point because of it. So
yeah,
I'm not complaining about this. I'm not complaining about this. I don't even know what the rules are behind this, but I thought it was interesting as well that we got a hydration break in the first half, but didn't get one in the second half. And that to me is like another, hey, that went against the Hounds as well, because they're, another 30 seconds of standing around trying to get water and all that kind of stuff that we needed because we had been playing down a man since the 4th minute, and we didn't get that. And I don't know if that's like, okay, cool, we look at the temperature of the first half, the temperature had dropped at halftime, and now we don't get a hydration break. But I thought the rules were that if you do a hydration break in the first half, you got to do one in the second half as well. And that was a little bit frustrating. I didn't even think about that. But then as the announcers were trying to talk about it in the 88th minute or whatever, trying to figure out how much stoppage times there's going to be, they said something about we didn't have a hydration break this half. And I was like, that's interesting, because we had one in the first half. So that was another indication of like, I'm not sure you knew what he was doing, because I thought you had to give one.
Yeah. Steve, did you have one other thought on this?
No, I mean, that's exactly, though, like right at the beginning, what I'm talking about when I say this isn't good for the league, that a game that has this much controversy because of the ref, we shouldn't be talking about the ref. And yet I don't think that anybody that is a neutral is not looking at this game and asking questions about the officiating, right? I mean, they may say, hey, I think that's a red card, or this or that, but I think that they're having the conversation, and that's not good for the league.
Yeah, agreed. All right, guys, let's move on from the ref. There were a couple of other things to discuss here. I think one of the first things, and Justin, you sort of had a hot take right at the beginning, but the lineup itself, when the lineup came out. So talk a bit about the lineup that the Hounds rolled out.
Yeah, it's interesting trying to look at a lineup and you think like, okay, you kind of at this point in the season, you can kind of, as much as Bob tinkers, you can kind of depend on like where everyone's going to be and what your alternates are in any given kind of situation. And then we roll out a lineup last night without Itu and without Blackstock. And okay, like these are two of our main guys that, and I talked about on Friday, we don't have any outside backs who can do what those two guys can do, and we're going to struggle because of that, and this doesn't make sense, and all this kind of stuff. And then we roll out a lineup without either of them in the lineup, and I just thought that was interesting about, and I felt like we learned a little bit about what happened to those guys and where they may or may not be. But it's interesting that the team isn't talking about it. If Junior is where he says he is, then why are we not celebrating the fact that he got called up for international duty and we haven't talked about that? And I don't understand that. And then kind of on the other end of the field, like, where is Sterling? Where is Bushalusa at this point? Like, why are we not getting updates on them as far as what's happening? And if they're just not playing or whatever, like, that's fine. But it is interesting that we have no idea kind of what's going on with those guys and why they're not on this road trip.
Yeah. It's that. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, no, I know Musha at some point got injured, but there's been no talk of it. So I don't know what the injury was. I don't know how serious it was, how long it was. But that's why I think he came out of the 18 like 2 months ago, right? But that's to your point, Justin, right? Like, no idea what the update is. And anything I've heard has been from other fans, and some fans who have some connections that are helpful to get some inside information, but that's not coming from the team. And so, sure, I trust these people to be truthful with me, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting the whole story, right? Like, that person may not be getting the whole story, or they may be getting it from not the right source, or a source that can't or won't say everything that would be useful for like fans to know. Yeah, I do want to say I felt the same as you, Justin. In retrospect, I think like the reality of those two guys not being available in Etu and Blackstock actually ended up playing in the Hounds' favor after the red card, because then you had guys on the field that were supposed to be a little more substitutes for them playing a little bit different of a position because they couldn't be as attacking as a team. And so having Rivera there, I think really actually worked out in the end.
Yeah. They had Rivera that played out wing. They slid Walty back to basically play right back for most of the game. And again, they did a job against an 11-man team. So I think that my beef with this is more along the lines of just all of the secrecy that the Hounds seemed obsessed with. And I know, like, we've had conversations in the past where some of this is to protect the players themselves, where it's like, if the player just isn't good enough, the team doesn't want to come out and just say like, no, they're just a healthy scratch, because they don't want the player to look bad. But at the same time, it feels like sometimes it's done for strategy's sake of like, we don't want the other team to know what players are here. And it's like, we're not even in the playoffs. Like, other teams are not that concerned about whether or not, maybe they are, that like Etu is here or not. They're not, they may not be game planning for that. And if they are, like, there's other ways that we're going to try to hit them as well. It just, it feels unnecessary, and it just leaves everybody scratching their head in a way, in a world where everyone is so used to like, we want to know the details about these players. We want to know who's playing. You have people that play, like Football Manager, where it's like you're constantly looking to the last minute, who's there, who's to do what. And it's just, this level of secrecy at this level just feels ridiculous to me. So again, if it does turn out that Etu's on international duty and we're not applauding that, like, what is going on here, guys? Come on.
Right.
So, yeah. Steve, it sounds like, in the vein of the lineups, you mentioned something about substitutions and potentially getting some of the substitutions right. What were your thoughts? That vein?
What minute was that one? 82nd minute, Mertz for Forbes, and EJ came off for Jake Lentcoop, right? And I liked that substitution. Bring in another defensive player. I am okay. Why is he then, as I said in our podcast Slack, kind of the Mo Dabo strategy of having him play way up top and press, which I'm fine with, right? Like, and like, you've got a defensive player, but I like that it was not a like for like substitution, even though he kind of put him in that spot. But you're putting in a player that has a really different skill set to get something out of it. I would have liked to maybe see him drop back more and maybe push Biasi out, maybe push Walty back up a little bit, right? Like I would have liked to see a little bit more tactical change with that. But it kind of worked for me. I did not understand why Biasi comes out and DN comes in, especially when you've got a midfielder in Aiden O'Toole on the bench still, right? Like you've got guys that can do that. Why are you bringing in a forward at 94 minutes, basically? It doesn't make sense to me. You're up 1-0, and I don't like that. And I think that is one of those situations where it's like you're throwing a guy in to go do something that he's never trained to do, right? To try to hold on to this win instead of bringing in a guy that has a skill set already. That's what you need at that stage.
Yeah. Justin, do you have any qualms with the subs, or were you okay with them?
No, I actually like the Lentcoop substitution and the tactics behind it. I saw what Bob was trying to do. He was trying to get a little bit more hold play to a guy who's used to reading long balls. You know, it's a guy who's played defense who, you know, when the Hounds get experienced, he's used to trying to read that and get underneath it anyway. And so I actually like this up. It didn't work out as well as I would have hoped it would, but I did like the sub, and I did feel like, all right, he's trying something. But to Steve's point, I didn't really understand that sub at the late stages, because you had Lentcoop doing what he needed to do at that point, and he did block a couple like long early crosses. You know, he was kind of there and got his foot on a couple of them, and so that's what you are trying to do is if you put a defender in that situation. But to the point of not knowing where Sterling is, not knowing really where Blackstock is at this point, those would have been guys who I'd rather have on the field at that point in time, if you're going to be making those. So I don't have any huge qualms with it. I actually thought last night's game was as well coached and as well as managed as Bob's done all season long. But unfortunately, just didn't get the result we needed.
Yeah. At the offensive end of things, just to touch on this really quickly, we had a couple of pretty good chances. Walty had a curling shot that I think he was shooting. I don't know if he knew he was shooting, that smacked off almost the upper 90 and came back out, which would have been beautiful had that gone in. And then you had Griffin's goal, which I'm still kind of impressed at the reaction time. I know, like, I'm a Griffin fanboy and people will call me as such, and that's fine. But this was a case where literally Mertz played the ball across into the box. Who was it that got the initial header?
I think it was Asumanu.
I think it was Kizza.
It was okay. So either Kizza or Asumanu, one of them. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Yeah, but headed it back across the goal.
Yeah, I think it was
couldn't get the power to put it on net. And Danny basically had to react, you know, in the span of like 10 feet, 12 feet of a ball going off somebody's head right at him at his foot. And he was able to react quick enough to get a shot off. It was a good goal. I mean, this is something that I think we've been talking about and hoping for weeks, of sort of more midfield involvement and getting Danny involved higher up the field. And this was the case where he had the freedom to do it, potentially because we were down a man. But yeah, good stuff there. Do you guys have any thoughts on the goal or the chances on the offensive end?
Yeah, I will say I think Walty was shooting. I think he saw the keeper kind of cheating toward the near post, and so he tried to curl it into the side netting on the far side. and just happened to hit the bar. I mean, he might have been crossing, but I'll give him the credit of shooting. Yeah, I thought we got a few chances. I would have liked to see a couple of them, go more on net or whatever. But when you're down a man, most of the game and all of that, you got to take what you can get. And I felt like we played fairly well and took some good chances. Griffin's goal was great, and until the 90+5, you complained.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I want to highlight a couple things about that goal, that it came off of a set piece. Ball got into the box, came back out, won the ball. Mertz made an excellent cross into the box. And then the header to Griffin, playing in an attacking position, right? And so in a game like this, I don't expect to see Griffin as far up as I'd like to see him when you're down to 10 men. But in a play like that, where, you can push some numbers forward on a set piece, you see what happens when Danny Griffin is in the action in the box, scoring that goal. And like, that's great. So I want to keep seeing that. I don't know if we will, because I've said it how many times? Our best defensive midfielder is not playing his best position.
Yeah. Two more questions for you guys about this game, and then if there's anything else you want to discuss, let's go for it. Who would you say was your man of the match for the Hounds? Justin?
Sean Suber.
Ooh, okay. Why?
I thought he was I thought this was maybe his best game in a Hounds uniform. He was all over the place and just ate up everything that came in the box. I mean, there was just nothing that got to any of the attack. Like, Indy all game long was trying to cross it in. And just between him and Osamanu, like nothing was getting to anybody in the box. And I just thought Super had a great game and came out, when Biazzi would get caught up field, he would come out and kind of guard the line and take that away too. And he almost owned a half of the box last night by himself and was probably and not that anybody bad. I didn't think anybody had a bad game. But I thought he was our best player by far last night.
That's a good shout. Steve, how about you?
I really like that shout. I'm gonna go on a little rabbit trail there. I predict that when we get to the end of next season, I will have Suber as one of the best center backs that Bob Lilly has signed for the Hounds. I think he will be up there at the end of next season as one of the top tier guys that we're talking about, like how good he actually was. Because his improvement this season, game over game over game, has been phenomenal, and I love it. But for me, it's got to be Eric Dick. I mean, I talked about that free kick. It took a top class shot from a set piece to beat him again. And so do I think he is the best goalkeeper we've seen under Bob Lilly? Not even close. But am I really happy with what I'm seeing out of him? And is he putting in performances and doing the things now in the season that I don't think he was doing earlier in the season? I mean, you talked to him recently, Mike, and he was talking about how he wants to be vocal. And I was like, but you weren't as vocal early in the season. Or maybe it just wasn't as obvious. Or maybe it just wasn't clicking as much. But it seems to be working really well. And I think that for me, not just his shot stopping ability, which I think is extremely good, but I think that's part of why Suber had such a great game. I think that's why Biasi had a good game. I think, right? Like, I think that's why the defenders were so good, because you could see the communication and he was pointing and he was shouting and getting guys to cover guys as they were coming in. And for me, that is just as important, if not more important, than the shot stopping ability.
Yeah. That's a good shout. I was torn between Dick and I'm going to say Griffin just to be different. But really, I could say either Griffin or Mertz, because basically you had those two guys trying to cover the space of three. Like of all the positions, obviously there's more pressure on the defense because you're sort of absorbing more pressure. I think we had like 20% possession. So the defense is absorbing a lot. But the way that we sort of adapted was by moving one of our central midfielders to right back. So you had Mertz and Griffin that had to cover more ground, and they covered more ground to the point that we were still able to push some of the attack. We were able to press a little bit, and they just like didn't stop running like they normally, and I'll just give the edge to Griffin because he got the goal, but Mertz was right there too. And as we said, that service in was great. So I think really this award could go to anybody. I shouldn't say anybody, but most of the guys on the team, because they all kind of put in a shift and really made it work. My other question for you guys as it relates to this game, at the end of the season, are we going to miss the playoffs by 2 points, or are we going to be in the playoffs by like 5 because of this result? Steve, which way do you think we fall because of the result of this game and how it ended up?
I don't think that this game or any game left for the Hounds is what makes the difference. I think the Hounds have to go out. They have to grind out a result on a tough night like that. And we're not going to win every single game for the rest of the season in my mind, right? And so I went into last night saying we're not going to win out, right? And so for me, it's not so much what the Hounds do. They still have to do stuff, right? They still have to go out. They have to get points. But it's what does everybody else do? And does a team fall off? Because everybody ahead of us has the chance to stay ahead of us. And there's nothing we can do about that. So I don't think this is the determining factor. I think results like Rhode Island beating Birmingham last night, those are the types of games and those interaction games that if one team keeps winning or one team keeps losing in those interaction games, that's what makes the difference. So
Justin, do you agree?
That was a creative way to evade the answer, Steve.
I was just thinking at the end. I didn't actually answer the question, did I? I'm channeling my best Kevin.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You just took the Kevin Sparks way of answering questions in this podcast. I actually, because of the way the game played out last night, I have a lot more confidence in the Hounds making the playoffs. I think I've kind of wavered back and forth, and when you're 11v11 and you don't get a result, then it's a little bit more, it's a little bit messier. But I think like that game showed me the Hounds have enough fight to make the playoffs, and I think now we'll see this week what happens. But I think given the way the results are falling, the 5 or so teams that are ahead of us and their typical late season slides, plus the inexperience of some of their coaches and players and et cetera, I think most of the 4 or 5 teams in front of us, I think we can catch. Now things have to fall our way. A team could get hot, but if I was a betting person right now, I think I would put some money on the Hounds get into the playoffs and they're not the last team in.
I think I agree with you. I think that's where I land as well. I think I saw enough in this game that I don't think that the loss of 2 points is going to keep us out. I think instead we ride this and this sort of propels us further up. Everything else that you guys said is true. I agree 1,000%, Steve, that a lot of this is not in our hands because, we've played 1 or 2 more games than most of these teams in the East. At the same time, well, we're not going to be playing against every team that's in front of us, but we're playing against a handful of them. So we'll have some control there. But again, still, they probably have another game to make up whatever points they may lose from us. But I do think that we should take enough from this game that we use it to pick up enough points over the stretch that Justin and I like the shout that we will get in and we won't be the last team in. Yeah. Do you guys have any other thoughts on this game before we just sort of quickly take a glance around the league and just sort of see what else is going on after this weekend?
I want to just kind of follow up on the performance overall. We were talking about who we think was man of the match and whatnot. But I do want to talk about like the team as a whole. And Justin started talking about Mertz and Griffin and how important they were. But this is a team that played 90 minutes a man down and only gave up, is it 13 shots? Yeah, 13 shots. Right, like that's a phenomenal defensive performance. When you're playing down, you give up, like the other team has 74% possession, but you limit them to 13 shots, and only 4 of those are on target. That's fantastic.
Yeah, agreed. Like I said, my immediate reaction after the final whistle last night was just disdain for the situation, but it quickly turned to praise for the guys and just sort of pride in what they were able to pull off. So yeah, agreed, 1,000%.
Yeah. One other thought for me, I think Steve kind of already touched on it, but I thought Dick last night was great, and not just his shot stopping. Like, he definitely had some shots to stop, and some of those 13 shots were before the red card. I mean, there was a couple that happened in the first minute and a half, 2 minutes of the game, and Dick got all those too. And so I think, like, but I think what made his performance last night even more was the shots that he prevented by being active off his line, which allowed the Hounds to play a higher line than you generally would when you're down a man. And so, and the announcers talked about it. They were like, he's kind of been eating everything up. They play the long ball. Dick's there before anybody else is. They try to go through the box, and Dick's reading it and catching it. And so, as good as Suber was, and I still would say that he's my man of the match, I think Dick prevented a lot of the shots that could have come his way. And it was cool because he just talked about that on the podcast of how I prevent shots from coming my direction, whether it's organizing the defense, whether it's catching crosses, all that kind of stuff. And he did it all last night and did it all really, really well.
Yeah, agreed. Overall, great performance by the crew. Like I said, shame that we didn't get all 3, but we'll take the 1 and we will move forward. Guys, looking around the league sort of real quickly, here's the current standings after last night's matches. So the Hounds are now just below the playoff line on 32 points. We're now, I think, 9 games without a loss, which nobody else above us can say, which is really good. When you sort of look at some of the other results, we've said how certain things need to fall our way. And if you really look at the last 2 weeks, between all of the teams 5th and down to us, there's only been 1 win. So again, Loudoun lost, Birmingham lost, Indy drew to us. Rhode Island is the only win in the last 2 weeks of the teams 5 through 8. So things are falling our way. We just need to go and make something of it. Loudoun is the team right above us on 34 points. So they're 2 points ahead of us. Granted, we have played 2 more games than them. So this is where we've said, some of this is out of our control. But, this is a case where had we won, well, we still would have been below the playoff line. We would have been tied with Loudoun on points, but they would have beaten us. They'd be beating us on goal differential. So, but we're getting there. We're not going to immediately jump from 9 to 4. Like there's going to be some stuff that needs to happen and shake out. But at the same time, we're only 6 points back from 4th place, which is kind of insane when you look at how tight it is. And the other thing is we can't also not look behind us. Like Hartford is in 11th place and they're on 29 points. They're 1 win away from tying us on points. The only team that's really out of it is Miami, and they shockingly won last night to get themselves to 11 points. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely going to be sort of a drag them down, beat them up sort of fight here down the stretch for these last few games. Yeah. Sorry, I tried to take it off the screen and I hit the wrong button. Go ahead, Justin.
No, a couple of things that stand out to me about kind of the standings is looking at Indy and Birmingham's goal differential, both being negative, tells me they're maybe punching above their weight at this point in time. And so you don't stay middle of the table when you are on a negative goal differential. And so that's one of the things that I look at and go, that probably gives me hope. And even Loudoun ahead of us, I'm pretty sure if you look across their schedule, they had a couple big wins at the beginning of the season, but I don't think they've done as much in the last 10, 15 games as they did in the first 5 to 10 games of the season. And so I think their goal differential is probably coming back down slowly. and all of that. So I look at it and I go, all right, like we've got a positive goal differential. We've our way out of an 8 or 9 game scoreless, winless streak, and all of that, and we still have a positive goal differential. And so those are the kind of like indications that I look at there of like that's our path forward, is like win a couple more games. You see, like we have the second most ties on the table, and from now until the end of the season, you try a couple more of those into wins, and we're in good shape. So that's the kind of stuff that I look at as I'm looking at the table and trying to figure out if there's a path for us to get to the playoffs.
Yeah. Steve, any thoughts on sort of the standings or how things are looking right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's 8 points between 4th and 10th. And as you look at the recent results, I think there's only a few teams that are showing some sort of consistency, right? Like Detroit is getting wins and ties. Rhode Island has put on a little bit of a streak. We've not lost a game. North Carolina has been able to win a couple. But I think what I look at and I see there is all of these teams are vulnerable, including the Hounds, right? Like this 4th through 10th could look very different in 2 months. And any one of those teams could be out. Do I think it's likely that Detroit and Rhode Island and Indy and Birmingham all fall out of the play? Well, I guess they can't all fall out of the playoffs, but like, do I think they all fall to the bottom of this list? I don't. But I think 1 or 2 of them may. And so for me, what that means is that's where I say like the Hounds need to go out and do what they need to do, and not worry about what everybody else is doing, because everybody else is going to continue to do, I think, the things that they're doing. And like Justin said, yeah, Indy, Birmingham, maybe Loudoun, maybe even Rhode Island are punching above their weight. And I think the Hounds have not punched at their weight for the majority of the season. If we can do that for the next 7 games, that can be really, really good for where we end up going into the playoffs.
We keep saying, it's not always where you start in the playoffs. It's the team that goes in that's the hottest, because you just have to win a few more games, and it's that push towards the end. You mentioned Rhode Island. It all sort of starts with Rhode Island. We do have 7 games left, and it's basically home and away, back and forth of the rest of the season against really all Eastern Conference teams except for El Paso, which is the last game of the season at home. So we do have Rhode Island at home this weekend. We're going to have a preview show. I'm going to talk to some of the guys, some of the Rhode Island fans on, I think, Wednesday. So it'll probably be a later show on Wednesday that comes out. But last time we played them was a 0-0 draw back in April. This is a home game against an Eastern Conference team. Justin, what's my question going to be?
Yes, it's finally a must-win game.
Oh, man.
That seemed to hurt you to say, Justin.
By definition, it's still not a must-win game. But I think this one, as we've been talking about, you got to win at home. You got to get results on the road, and that's what we did last night. If you had told me before last night's game that we were going to get a 1-1 draw, sure, cool, great, let's do it. How we got it was what was disappointing in that, and so I think this one, yeah, it's not a hey, if you don't win this one, you're definitely out of the playoffs. So we're not Miami, we're not in that situation, but you have to get 3 points at home. Like we have to make Highmark a tough place to play, and we've got to win these games. And so is it a must-win game? No. Is it a have to win? Yeah, it's a have to win game.
Yeah. Steve, we're just gonna start reframing it.
Have to win game. It's not a must win. It's a have to win.
Steve, I'm assuming you don't disagree.
I don't disagree, but I do think that this is a game that you have to go out and win. You must win. It's not a have to win game. It's a must win game.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to sort of see how things shake out over the week. I'm assuming we won't get any more clarity on what players will or won't be available prior to Saturday night, but we shall see. It will be interesting to hear sort of a Rhode Island's fan perspective on things.
That's awesome. Like first team like first year in the league and find people to talk to already. That's great.
They have a we'll say growing podcast over there where they've been reaching out to sort of every team to do like insider type shows all season. So
Awesome.
for their first season, they're doing really well. I think it's called Rising Tide. But yeah, it'll be a good conversation. We might do like a back and forth where they join us and then I'll join them for their show. So we'll get both sides of things. But yeah, that is what we think. Obviously, let us know what you think, guys. Any other sort of final thoughts here before we switch gears and thank all Rhode Island for the rest of the week?
It is nice that we are home for more games than we're away for the rest of the season. If we've got 7 left and we're home and away, that means 4 at home. That's 12 points. If we get all 12 of those, we're going to be pretty close. Like, it would be hard for us to miss the playoffs getting 12 points. And it may not matter what you do in the other 3.
Yeah. I think if you look at the table and you look at just in terms of not even like the pattern, but you don't see a lot of teams winning 4 out of 7. Yeah. It's especially the guys ahead of us. It's like a loss, a win, a couple draws, maybe another loss. So yeah, if we can pick up 12 points over the next 7 for sure, that would be great. Yep. Steve, any other final thoughts here?
Nope.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. We appreciate you checking us out, giving us a listen, giving us a watch. We appreciate the comments and all of the subscriptions. As I mentioned, we will be back with more Hounds content later this week. And so therefore we will talk to you very, very soon.
See ya.